I would love to introduce a native New Yorker, just like myself. He has told stories all over the Northeast, as well as with children, which I very much appreciate as a fifth grade special education teacher myself. He's also a visual artist and an author himself of the book Conversation with Ruth Pitter. So please buy his book and support him. He also, as with many of our identities, he performs country music under a pseudonym, which is amazing. So please welcome to the stage Thomas McKean.
Is this good? Okay. Yeah, let the microphone grow. There were 5 of them, 5 blue-eyed Irish girls: Catherine, Margaret, Teresa, Lillian, and Margaret. And I've forgotten the other one all of a sudden. The Lower East Side in the 1890s was a rough place for recent Irish immigrants, escaping the potato famine, not to mention English rule. And they were poor, very poor. My grandmother, Catherine, Kitty as she was called, the sole happy memory she had of her girlhood was the time there was a little bit of extra money, 1 penny. She was given 1 penny to go spend as she wished. She went out over to Essex Street and she bought a pickle. She recalled decades later reaching her hand into that big pickle barrel that was on the sidewalk and pulling out the first pickle for her to eat. That was hers, all hers. Her older sister Jo would probably have fished around for the biggest one, but Kitty, my grandmother, she took the pickle that life had to give her. They were a typical Irish family, Irish immigrant family. Their father worshipped the bottle. Their mother worshipped the Bible. And from what I can gather, the grandfather, Timothy, was not just a drunk, but an abusive one. The only lie I ever heard my grandmother tell was about her father. When I was little, I said, what did your dad do for a living? And she said, oh, he was a fireman, a good, noble career. Later, she let slip that once in a blue moon, he'd be hired to throw a few extra pieces of coal into the tenement's furnace. So in a sense, he was sort of a fireman. No pictures exist of Timothy Sheehan, my great-grandfather, but I gather he was a good-looking, blue-eyed Irish rogue. The mother, Mary White, there is one photograph of her. She was a pretty woman, a bit melancholy-looking, posing for this picture, wearing a white ribbon around her throat. It must have been taken just a few years before she died. Mamie, one of the daughters, said, if only the family had had a little more money, surely a doctor would have been called, and surely her life would have been spared. But they didn't have the extra dollars. There was not money for the poor people to get medical care, so as we can see, not much has changed in the past 130 years. So it was when the girls were between 10 and 15 years old, they lost their mother. Soon they were kneeling by her casket in the underheated church, weeping, desolate. After the funeral, their father, Timothy, went off on a bender. In his absence, the 5 sisters had a conference. Jo and Kitty, they were sure it was the right thing to do. Tessie, Mamie, and Lily needed a bit of convincing. 2 weeks later, Timothy staggered home, reeking of beer and whiskey, still wearing the same suit he'd worn to the funeral. He was met at the door by his 5 daughters, standing in a row. In his absence, they'd packed up his few belongings in a carpet bag. Jo, the eldest, handed it to him, and she said, "Take it. We never want to see you again." Timothy was shocked. He looked at his 5 daughters and saw 5 pairs of determined blue eyes staring back at him. He said, but There were no buts about it. In unison, the 5 girls said, "We never want to see you again." Now, the year was 1898. There was no welfare. Charity was hard to come by. So the 5 girls went down to the local church, and they spoke to the priest. And this was the priest who had officiated at their mother's funeral just 2 weeks before and had seen the 5 girls weeping over the casket. He heard what they had done, and he said, "I am ashamed of you 5. You betrayed the Bible. Doesn't it teach you to respect your elders? You betrayed the goodwill of your kind father. You must go home now, get on your knees, and pray to God. Pray to your father for forgiveness. I'll find the good man, and I'll send him home to you. And if you ask him real nicely, I'm sure he'll take you back, and he'll take grand care of you, he will." That kind of care they did not need. And though all 5 remained fervent Catholics, I'm pretty sure this put a dent in their belief. They held another conference. This time, they packed up all their belongings: dresses, shoes, pots, pans, a Bible, the picture of their mother, the picture of their father they let lay behind. They had to get out quick before Timothy showed up. Somehow, they were able to rent a cold water flat in the East 20s. Now came the problem of earning a living. None had any skills. Cooking was definitely not a family tradition, so that was out. But they could wash floors, clothing, they could embroider, they could wash windows. My grandmother, the youngest, was still in school. She stayed there for a few more years, and then she too had to find work. She, among the 5, had a skill. She had the most beautiful handwriting. And I think I owe my existence to this handwriting, because with it, she could get a job as a secretary. And I sometimes wonder, in a different world, if she would have become an artist. She had a sure eye and a sure hand. My father, her son, became an artist, visual artist, as am I. So it was Kitty became a secretary. And I'm pretty sure she adorned most of the offices where she worked. Besides being pretty, she was hardworking, honest, kind, thoughtful, humble. And she was innocent, despite her rough girlhood, and soon had fallen in love with her rather stern boss, a man named Samuel McKean. But he was already married to a woman named Berta, and they had 4 young children. So Kitty would take his letters down and gaze upon him. Then around 1914, Berta died in childbirth. Sam proposed to Kitty and was accepted. By then they were living in London, and Kitty was so determined she went to every church all around London until finally she could find one priest who would deign to marry a Catholic to a Protestant. Her sisters, meanwhile, 3 of them became nuns. Jo never lost her temper and was always in hot water with the Mother Superior. All 3 became what was called nursing sisters of the destitute poor. Jo, with her hot temper, was usually sent to the sickest parishioner in the most distant tenement. But I do wonder if the 3 had chosen this, thinking back when their mother was sick and dying, that nobody had come to her assistance. Kitty, meanwhile, had quite a good life for a while. They moved from London to Brussels. They had a chauffeur, a cook. All the 6 children went to boarding schools in England and France. Somehow her father had heard of Kitty's good fortune and got in touch with her. She refused to see him. None of the 5 girls ever saw their father after the day they had given him his carpetbag and told him to get out. Kitty lived a good long life to 90 years old, as did all her sisters. They all lived to be their 90s, some to their hundreds. The only time I ever heard my grandmother speak something ill about somebody was when I asked her what her father was like. Kitty kind of pursed her lips, narrowed her blue eyes, sort of scrunched up for a moment, And then she said, "He was no good." That was all she would say. In her later years, Kitty lived mostly with my aunt down in Pennsylvania and 2 or 3 months with us in New York. One day when she was about 90, and she still went to church every Sunday, I said to her, "Grandma, how does the priest here, how do his sermons compare to the ones down in Pennsylvania?" My grandmother pondered the question, gave a little smile, and I kind of wondered if she was remembering that pompous priest who wouldn't help 5 starving, scared girls. And she said, "I don't know, dear. When I get to church and I sit down, I take out my hearing aid." Thank you.